Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast, where we talk about life, death and experiences in between. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I trust that the conversations within this podcast will offer value, insight and information into what happens in the afterlife. To find out more about the free online community and extra content, be sure to click subscribe and to check out the links in the notes below. And now, let's get into today's episode.
I got up from my pillow to have a look and just saw a car coming straight at us. And I remember looking around me thinking, where am I and what is happening? And it was very dark. That was one little snippet. I remember having this absolute panic, thinking they'll never find my parents because he spelt my surname wrong. And I literally felt myself fly back into my body. I opened up my eyes and I called out to the nurse and said, "It's L-E-A, it's L-E-A."
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of your show, and I'm very excited by our conversation today. Kohn-Taylor runs the mental fitness company. She's all about business, about empowering people. She's got an amazing backstory. She is doing some incredible work to help people to really connect into their purpose, understand what it is that they need to be doing in life, and giving them the tools to be able to get the most out of life while we're here. So many good things to come. So welcome to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. It's fabulous to have you here. You had a near-death experience when you were 19 years old. Take us back. How do you go from having a near-death experience at age 19 to where you are today, where you're thriving in business, you're helping people to change their lives, and you're living a very spirit-inspired life?
Oh gosh, it actually seems like a long time ago now, and it probably is. 19, I was having the time of my life. I was in my second year at university, and I was living away from home in a town called Palmerston North. I was studying business. And it was a great freedom for me, I think, as you do when you leave home and you go away to university. Lots of good times, lots of friends. I had huge ambitions in life, always been very ambitious. So this was sort of the start of me heading out and creating my world. Halfway through the year, as we did, we sometimes used to come home and visit our families. And so 3 other friends of mine, in fact, one of them was a boyfriend, decided to come up to Auckland for the weekend and surprise our parents. So we drove up to Auckland. It was about a six and a half hour drive and had a wonderful weekend with family and had a great weekend. And then met up back at one of our friends' homes and jumped in the car to head off back down to university. And I always remember this little thing of my mother hugging me more times than she normally would and making sure I was safe and secure in the back seat of this car. And I didn't quite notice it at the time. It was only later where I reflected back and asked her about it, and I'll tell you that story as part of this. Mm-hmm. So we headed on down to university, and it was a horrible, horrible afternoon of weather. And I was in the back seat. I was asleep, and all of a sudden I heard people in the car yelling and saying some swear words. I got up from my pillow to have a look and just saw a car coming straight at us. It was a head-on car accident, and it was dark and it was raining, and that's all I remember.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, wasn't nice. I have no idea how long late it was. I remember a couple of little moments. One, I woke up and I was lying on the side of the road, and I remember looking around me thinking, where am I and what is happening? And it was very dark. That was one little snippet. And the second snippet was when I was in the ambulance, which is when I had my out-of-body experience. And I remember this even now to the absolute minute detail of what actually happened. Up in the back of the ambulance, sort of up on the roof, and I was looking down at my body in the ambulance on the left, and there was my friend on the right. And there were two people driving the ambulance, and there was this lovely nurse who was in the back with us called Marie. And she was talking to my flatmate because I was unconscious, and the ambulance people were chatting away, and we had a major problem, and they were talking about the fact that they shouldn't have put the two of us in the same ambulance because my flatmate had a really bad back, and so he was feeling every little bump that was happening. And he was telling them to slow down, stop bumping him around. Later turned out he'd actually broken his back. I was unconscious, and they were saying, and I was bleeding heavily from my head, and they were saying we should never have put them in the same ambulance. We need to go fast. We need to get her to hospital. And I was in the back of the ambulance just floating, observing all of this, being quite curious and quite calm about it all.
Wow. So many thoughts. What was going through your mind? Like, you're having an outer body, so you're outside your body, but you're listening to this conversation about how your situation is potentially quite pressured, it's very serious. Are you feeling connected to your body still? Are you aware?
No.
Did you have a clue what's even happening?
No, I had no idea what was happening. It was like I was observing a movie, and I was in a movie set watching this happening. And I remember thinking, this isn't good. No. Yeah. But also being very connected to the fact that, that's my body down there. That's my body in there, and I don't look too good. And listening to the conversation almost as if I was physically there, part of the conversation as to what was happening. And I'm sure if I could actually have let my voice be heard and join in the conversation, that's what it felt like I wanted to do. But I was also very aware that I wasn't there, and they didn't know that I was there.
Yeah, right. And if you could have joined into that conversation, what do you think you might have said? Because it sounds like you felt pretty good.
I felt very calm about it all. And I almost wanted to say to everybody, it's all okay. It's going to be all okay for everybody. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but for some reason I just felt incredibly calm and incredibly at peace until this particular moment where Marie, the nurse, was talking to my flatmate, and she said to him, "What's her name? We need to get in touch with her family and tell them that they need to get to hospital." And they were having a conversation about that, and he told her my name and said my first name, Sue, and my name then at the time was Lee. My surname was Lee. And she said, how do you spell that? And he said L-E-E, and my surname was actually L-E-A. And in that moment, I remember having this absolute panic, thinking, they'll never find my parents because he spelt my surname wrong. And I literally felt myself fly back into my body. I opened up my eyes and I called out to the nurse and said, "It's L-E-A, it's L-E-A." And then I was out of there again.
Oh, wow. And I'm just thinking further down the track of, what if you hadn't been able to do that? They may never have been able to contact your parents. What happened? Did your parents get there? Obviously, they got there in time because you're here today with us, but it must have been pretty close, pretty touch and go.
We ended up obviously getting into the hospital. I was unconscious for a long time. My parents had to drive, obviously, I think it was about 4.5 hours to get to me. And by the time they had found my parents and contacted them, it was close to midnight. My parents jumped in the car and drove down, and by that stage I was stitched up. And the result of this was I actually had a severe head injury and almost de-scalped myself, and in amongst a whole lot of other injuries of sternum and legs and all sorts of other injuries, ripped ligaments. So the head injury was the greatest concern because I was losing a lot of blood, lost a lot of blood because it cut a major artery in my head. Within a couple of days, I actually came back round to feeling semi-normal. But what I really noticed kept on playing in my head was that out-of-body experience. It was so fresh. I actually lost my short and my medium-term memory. And this is the weird thing that I still can't piece together. So as a result of the head injury, I lost my short and my medium-term memory. But this memory of having this out-of-body experience is embedded so clearly as if it happened yesterday.
Isn't it amazing? Because this is what I hear so often, is just the specificness of the memory. And yeah, I remember when we first met and you were telling me your story, and I was thinking, oh, wow, that's just amazing. You knew her name. Somebody who's just been through a major head trauma. You said the rest of your body was pretty badly beaten up, but to remember her name, to remember that you were out of your body, what that felt like, everything that was going on, and then going back in and then trying to communicate. They've spelled the name wrong. You're not going to find my parents. The clarity is literally out of this world. It just blows my mind. It really, really does. I want to go back a little bit. There was something you said which has triggered a thought process for me. It was that your mother made sure that you were in the back seat of the car and that you're tucked in all safe. And you said that she spent a little bit more time than normal just saying goodbye and I guess farewelling you on that trip, that road trip, which is supposed to be about 6 or 7 hours and it ended up obviously quite a lot longer. Did you ever talk to her about that? Did you ever say, Mum, did you have any inkling, or did it ever come up in conversation?
Yes, absolutely. My mum said that even when she dropped me off, she had strong intuitive feelings. She didn't really understand it, but she said, I felt as if I had that nervous feeling in my stomach when I dropped you off. And she said it bothered me, but my mother she was very connected to herself, but I wouldn't call her sort of spiritual or broader in her understanding of going, what does that actually mean? And so she said it bothered her, but she didn't know what that meant, but she felt very anxious and wanted to make sure that I was on the left-hand side of the back of the car, not on the right-hand side, for whatever reason, I don't know, because actually the guy who was on the right-hand side actually came off and he was almost fine. So my mother almost blamed herself that she said I should have left you where you got in on the right-hand side.
Oh, your poor mum. She can't hold that, can she? Not at all. No one wants to know.
No, but so when they got the phone call from the hospital saying that I was unconscious and they needed to get there, she suddenly put 2 and 2 together and went, that's why I felt like a sick feeling in my stomach. And for her, she thought she'd done the right thing by saying, no, sit on the other side of the car. Yeah. But it was only later when she found out that I was actually the worst off in the car out of everybody that she felt terrible, that she'd said to me, no, sit over that side.
Oh, wow. And she did it out of love. It's funny you mentioned that because we have this thing that we talk about as well, that the safest seat is right behind the driver, because in a spate of fear of having to act in the moment, if something was to happen, the gut or the natural instinct is that the driver will just instinctively, in theory, look after themselves because they're driving the car. They're not going to be considering the passengers. They're trying to drive the car, and our gut thing in an absolute state of panic is to protect ourselves. So We've always talked about how the seat, I know a lot of our listeners are the steering wheel's on different sides of the car. So here in New Zealand, it's on the right-hand side, which would make that seat, if we're going by the theory that I've lived by and the one that I've heard time and time again, that would be the safest seat in the car.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, your poor mother.
So she felt absolutely terrible, and it took a long time for her to actually just be okay with that. I think had it not turned out to be a good story, she might have probably really carried that with her for the rest of her life.
Gee, that's really weighing my heart. It's very intense, isn't it? The reason I wanted to actually ask you about that was because I interviewed somebody just yesterday, and I'm not sure whether this episode will be released probably the week before this one that we're currently doing comes out. But she had the same thing. She was in a car accident. Her mother had come, and she said, my mother just made a bit more of a fuss about me. She said she came running out to the car and she said, wait, you haven't said goodbye properly. And she was thinking, oh, okay, say goodbye to my mother. And then she was in the car accident. So it's probably because it's so fresh in my mind after talking to her just yesterday to hear you say something similar. But I also remember when my own father died, I tried to phone him less than 24 hours beforehand. I just had this check that I had to connect with him. I just wanted to check in with him. There was just something there. And I wonder how often, because I've heard a lot of different personal stories now, a lot of people saying, in hindsight, I think they were trying to warn me, or I think that person knew somebody was going to die. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in our subconscious. So that was my original reason for asking the question. And then, wow, we just got so much more out of it. You went on to say that your mother wasn't necessarily spiritual. How would you describe where you are? Do you think that this experience of being in the ambulance, the outer body, when they're saying that you're really in a bad state, your body's very, very damaged, do you think that that's prompted anything spiritually for you?
Well, absolutely. And it's interesting, you know, I'm very philosophical about how life events shape us and shape what we end up doing. Interestingly enough, when I was in my younger years, I was very spiritually connected. And I had a lot of experiences of seeing spirit, of seeing people's auras, interestingly. So when I was in kindergarten, I used to draw pictures of people with rainbows around them all the time.
Wow.
And nobody understood that. And the teachers used to say to me, why do your people have rainbows around them? And I go, well, that's what I see. Those are people.
Yeah.
And as I got older, it became more apparent that this was something that was very much part of who I was. But my mother used to find it a bit scary. I still remember at one point talking to my father and saying, do you think we need to send her somewhere because isn't this evil? This is not good. And that was her belief around it. So very naturally as a child, I started shutting that side down of me because I started thinking this isn't good, this isn't normal. So for a big period of my teenage years, I completely shut that spiritual side of myself down. Then I had this out-of-body experience, and it wakened it totally up to me again that I thought there is so much more to life than we realize. And it took me back to there's a reason for this. And I've shut that all down. But actually, if I used it in a healthy way, how could that help me? And so it really was the open door for me to step into my spirituality even greater. And I had so many amazing experiences in my 20s by just opening myself up to it and seeking out spiritual leaders, people who understood this, to give me comfort, to help me understand how to feel safe when I did see spirit, when I did see people's auras. And that was one of the best things that I ever did for myself. Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. And so you had that when you were in kindergarten, you're seeing the auras, you've had your experience. Do you still see auras? Do you still see spirits?
Yes, I do. Interestingly, I think because I'm in business and a businesswoman, well, I tend to get in my head, my mental head a lot. So you tend to drop that sort of intuition and the spiritual side because I'm thinking too cerebrally. But even 2 days ago, my daughter was up from university herself and she was sitting on her bed in her bedroom. And I looked at her and I went, oh, beautiful aura all around her. So when I am a little bit disconnected from my work and I'm relaxed, then yes, that definitely does come back. Not every day, not every week, but I'm sure if I wanted to tap back into it, it would be there. And from seeing spirits, yes, quite often see certain people. I'm very connected intuitively to people who have passed on in my life. I firmly believe that I have some carers that are around me. I have an intuitive cook or chef that I'm very connected with.
Okay, we're going to need to talk about that because that sounds amazing for a start. But can you expand on that, please?
The chef.
Yeah.
So I have this, and people have commented me often before. I never time food. I never use recipes. I have never been trained as a cook. It's just something that innately comes to me. And I put it out there to my chef and I say to him, is this meat ready? And he'll tell me, no, 10 more minutes. I'll taste something, put something together and say, it's lacking something. What shall I add? And bang, there'll be a couple of ingredients that are thrown at me to go, try this and try that.
Oh my goodness, that just sounds so useful.
Yeah,
I do not have this. It's the first time I've heard somebody explain this to me in one of these interviews. Yeah. Oh, that would be amazing. That would change probably the way that we eat entirely. I mean, I don't mind the kitchen, but I tend to do the same things over and over again. They get a bit bland, a bit boring. So if I could just tap into that, that would be amazing. You've also got me thinking, though, through that, Sue, I wonder, because, I've not heard of a spiritual chef. I wonder what else there are. Gosh, all the areas of life. There must be so many different influences and spirits and, I guess, communication that we can tap into. So I love how you talk about how you have your helpers around you. Are you talking like a spiritual team? Like, would you call them angels? Would you call them spirit guides?
Yeah, I call them my spirit tribe.
Oh, that's cool.
They're part of what I call my universe, and I call on people when I need them. There are some people that I've had, like I have a black Labrador. I don't know why I have a black Labrador, but
you mean a spirit, not physically?
Spirit, yep, spirit.
Yep.
I also have an old sort of fisherman, very in the old days with a big beard and a pipe, and I know when he's around because I smell tobacco from smoking a pipe. That's his way of letting me know that he's there. Now, the dog and the old fisherman, I'm not sure why they hang around me, but there are certain people like the chef. I've also had some people who are attached to the work that I do that very much help me craft my work that I do in the mental fitness space. And I just lean into them when I need them and ask them. And they might not be there straight away, but they certainly give me advice often at about 2, 3, 4 in the morning.
Yeah, that convenient time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. Wow, it's so interesting.
I believe we all have these people around us. It's just a matter of tapping into them. And they're willing and able to help in all sorts of ways. Even my mum, I know, keeps an eye on my daughter when she's driving my mother's car. So when my mother died 5 years ago, and my daughter has inherited her car. Now, it's interesting because even when I get into the car and she gets into the car, we can both smell the perfume of my mum, even 5 years on.
Wow.
Other people who get into the car can't smell it.
Oh, yes. This blows my mind. I love this. I hear of it quite often, actually. It smells, it's seeing different things, smells. And that I thought about that when you were talking about the fisherman with the beard and the tobacco smell. There's very unique smells, aren't they? And they're often associated to our past loved ones or to spiritual beings around us. I love it. I love it. You just said we all have the ability to tap in and get the help from these spiritual helpers. I've had this question asked many times. People have emailed me. There's been different people saying, how do I tap in? What do I need to do? What would you say to that question?
Most definitely, and I think this is because of the kind of work that I do, we're all very busy and we keep our head full of our day-to-day lives. And to actually tap in, we need to be quiet. One of my favourite things that I get people to do, and I've even done this with people who have no connection at all, is actually going to a forest. Go on your own or go with someone, but then be apart from each other. And just walk through a forest until you find a tree that you connect with. And you'll just sort of go, yeah, this is my tree. This is the kind of tree that I want to stand in front of. And you can touch the tree, you can hug the tree, but the most important thing is just being very, very present with that tree and listen to what conversation comes to you in your mind. And that is often the place where you start connecting with that intuition, with those spiritual voices that will send you messages. But you need to be quiet and calm, and being on your own is absolutely fabulous. Be very present to your environment, because we know nature is incredibly healing. It has magical ions that come out of it, the same as mountains and rivers and anything to do with nature. So getting out to nature is the best way to actually start.
I love that. Absolutely agree and absolutely love it. There's something about trees, isn't there? I don't know. I just love them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, this has been fabulous. So interesting chatting with you. I know that you're doing very well. You've got your mental fitness company, so you're, very successful businesswoman. Do you think that some of your success in that and your drive has come out of your experience?
Absolutely. And in actual fact, what happened when I had my car accident and I ended up going back home is there was very little rehabilitation. And essentially, this is where I learned what I call mental fitness. So I had very little rehabilitation. And the scope of my rehabilitation was literally going to my doctor once a week. And he had a pack of playing cards, and he'd show one to me and put it down. And if I could repeat what that card was, then I was doing well. And then we'd get to 2 cards, and then we'd get to 3 cards. That was the limit of what was available for my rehabilitation.
Oh, wow.
And so I was very conscious of the fact that I felt like my world had come to a crashing end, and all my hopes and dreams of what I wanted had disappeared out the window. And so I was so determined not to make that the story that I said to myself, come on, girl, you've got to get in there and actually rehabilitate yourself, because this is not how I want my life to be. And so that's essentially what I did. And this is where I learned about mental fitness, which essentially was, for me, I had to have daily wellbeing rituals that I did that were really good to fuel my mind and my body and my brain to get it working again. And then it was also the development of myself, so personal development. And every day, every single day, I would do something to actually grow myself, to make my body and my mind better. And so I use that practice now, even with my clients today, that if we want to be mentally fit, and I am so mentally fit now because I understand so much of how the mind works, how we can be our worst enemy, that we need to do the self-work to actually get the best out of our life. And I decided, because of what I learned through my own rehabilitation, that the tagline for my business is actually helping to make being human an easier job. Because what I see so much of is people complicating their life. We're all the same. We're all human. We have life experiences. We bring them along with us, but we do make our lives so complex. And I realized that when I was rehabilitating myself, how simple life could be, and how enjoyable it could be, and how much you can actually create just by sticking to some simple principles.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. And there's a very strong resilience theme coming through. We're going to put the links to your site and your business in the show notes. So if you're listening and you're thinking, I want to learn more about Sue, or I want to learn more about mental fitness, go and check her out. She's got some great stuff in there. So my next question for you is, I think there's a perception that we can't be spiritual and be successful in business at the same time. Have you heard that? You're laughing, so I'm assuming that you've come across this before.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why do we think this? Where does this come from? And do you think that it's possible? Because I know loads of spiritual women who are amazing in business, and they're within their purpose and they've been given these giftings. Why do you think this comes out, that we can't be both at the same time?
I think it's a misunderstanding of what that spirituality is, that probably for a big part, until things like yoga and Reiki and all these spiritual practices that people bring to the table about what it is to be human, used to be viewed as something that you didn't get paid for, something that was kind of hidden and over there. And when you think about it, how often do you hear people talking about these things? I, for years, have hidden my spiritual talents.
Yeah.
And so I think there's still a hangover of that misinterpretation that it's something we don't get paid for, that it's a bit woo-woo and you can't bring it into a business sense. But I can tell you some of the greatest successes that I've had with my clients has actually been introducing spirituality into their life.
Yeah.
And I've got a great example of an owner of a business who incredibly successful, but has this dissatisfaction in his personal life. Now, he has more money than he knows what to do with, but he had this aspect and he couldn't put his finger on it. A few weeks ago, he went away on a walk into the beautiful New Zealand mountains. And there was a day that they arrived at their hut early, and they had about 4 hours just sitting outside on a deck overlooking the bush and the trees and the forest. And he said to me, I haven't done that before. And I felt this incredible feeling of, he said it was kind of a warm, fuzzy feeling. And he said it has stuck in his mind and he wants more of that. He said it was almost like some sort of drug that he was going, I want more of that. That was amazing. What was that I experienced? And for him, he said, I don't believe I can bring that into my life because I'm a businessman. So I think it's attitudes as well of how we view what spirituality is. Spirituality comes in many, many forms. And that's what I say to people. They say, oh, I'm not religious. And I say, it's not about religion. It's a bigger picture of why are we here? What are we doing? And what is life actually about? There's so much more to us than just being in our cerebral thinking head and producing work that brings in money. So most definitely, spirituality, I think actually the more successful business people are the ones that actually bring a spiritual element into themselves and into their business, because they're so much more connected, they're so much more in tune with their intuition, that I wish more people would actually do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just like your chef, where you can call on, what should I put in here? We've got business beings around us. We can call on, what am I meant to do with this? I use it all the time. I tap into my team all the time with what should I do? And I sort of just sit there and let it resonate with me. What should I do in this situation? Should I release this? Should I release that? We just need to tap into it, like you've said.
Absolutely. And I think also it's not being obsessed about that success comes from money as well. Because,
yeah, totally.
When you're in doing your thing that really touches your heart and it's coming from within, then that gives greater joy than what I see a lot of my clients that have so much money, but they have miserable lives. And you just go, what's the point of that? Power, money is power. Money is fabulous. It gives you freedom. And if you can use those financial gains for the good, then that's just magic.
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally agree with that. That's amazing. Oh, so I've so enjoyed chatting with you. We've chatted all over many, many different topics here. We have, and I've loved it. So you've had an out-of-body experience. You came very, very close to dying. You're in the back of the ambulance. You've learned everything. You've been given gifts. You've got abilities. You can see auras. You can see spirits. You've got your team of helpers around you. Through everything that you've been given in your life, through everything that you've experienced, what is one thing you would like to leave with our listeners today? It's hard to choose one.
It is hard to choose one. I think it's really for everybody. I encourage everybody to dig deeper into the meaning of their life and why they're here, and not to get complex about it, but to really tune into what's on the inside. Because in this crazy world that we live in, so many of us are living externally and bouncing around in what I call the spam area, that my greatest wish for everybody is to actually start from the inside out and actually go within and remember that we're all human, we're all the same. to actually find out who you really are, who you are on the inside, not who you've been shaped by and who you've become by all the spam and the noise on the outside. But who are you? Who is this person that's right inside you? Because to me, when you find that, when you do more work on that, it is the ultimate freedom of living life on this earth, and the rest is all a bonus.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. Oh, that really resonates with me. Sue Kohn-Taylor, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed chatting. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. So thank you so much. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with all of the events we have going on, and to visit www.letstalkneardeath.com to join the VIP community.